Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. It's the post-game podcast from the Timberwolves' heartbreaking overtime loss to the Pacers on Monday night, snapping what was an 8-game win streak. This one's all about Obi Toppin. Yes, Obi Toppin's career night and Rudy Gobert's ejection, sparking the Wolves' second-half comeback. Should have ended in a very different way for Minnesota. We'll break the whole thing down here next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Happy Tuesday, everybody. The Timberwolves lost on Monday night to the Pacers in overtime. A truly heartbreaking loss given the 8-game winning streak. Yeah, second night of the back-to-back, and the Pacers are a good team overall, but struggling lately, missing a lot of guys due to injury. We'll get into all that. And the Wolves came out flat, and it took a bit of a scuffle in the third quarter to get them back into it. And then I thought overall played pretty well down the stretch in the fourth quarter. It actually took a pretty superhuman performance from Obi Toppin, of all people, and the Pacers as a whole, some young kind of no-name type guys. I don't mean that in like a derogatory way, like just guys that aren't typical rotation guys, right? Like if you're a casual fan, you have no idea who they are. As somebody who covers the league, I don't know much about most of the guys that played in this game down the stretch for the Pacers. Most of them is maybe a strong way to say that. But all that to say, these weren't like, this Nembhard was ejected and, they're missing, all these other, obviously Tyrese Halliburton was out and Nesmith was out and Pascal Siakam was out for personal reasons. Miles Turner, like all these guys that you would expect to be in there down the stretch that led this team to the conference finals last year were not on the floor, and yet they still outdueled the Wolves. And I thought it was more parts impressive on the part of these Pacers players down the stretch, at least specific to down the stretch. We'll talk about the first half issues for the Wolves, but that is what really floored me in this one. Anyway, a lot to get to. We'll talk about the Rudy ejection. We'll talk about the down the stretch, I guess, play calling and execution from the Wolves and Ant and Julius Randle. All that is going to be on the show today. A big thank you off the top, though, before we get into it all, for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch this show in the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder, you can also subscribe to the Locked On Wolves daily newsletter at lockedondaily.com. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. All right. So I already set this thing up pretty much. This was tough. I did not see the Wolves losing this game. And frankly, it's the toughest game in this stretch for Minnesota. I mean, they've got consecutive games against the Pelicans upcoming. They'll get the Pacers on the road. But this being the second night of a back-to-back against the team that likes to play fast, had a bunch of young, hungry guys in the lineup, and obviously well coached. And it's not like, I mean, they had Nembhard, they had Benedict Mathurin, they had a couple of guys. Obviously, they had Obi Toppin. Even if all the guys off the bench were, pretty unsung type players, like this should not have been an easy game, for the Wolves. And ultimately, it wasn't, obviously. The start of this game looked like it was going to be a rock fight. It really did. Like it was, I meant to pull up the actual, it was like 4-2, like 5 minutes into this game. Let's see. I promise that's true. Yeah, it was 4-2 at the 8:35 mark. So not 5 minutes in, 3.5 minutes into this game, it was still 4-2. This game was 10-10. Well, I guess at the midway point, it was 11-10 at the midway point of the first quarter. But then all of a sudden, both teams woke up offensively and remembered that they're both good offensive teams and, both top 10 offenses. And the first quarter ended as a 30-30 draw. And then the second quarter, the Pacers just straight out played Minnesota. And Minnesota went back to being flat offensively. And I blame it. A big part of it is the starters, right? The second half of the first quarter, I mean, the guys that were getting into the flow of the offense and scoring were Reid. I guess Julius Randle was back on the floor at that point after coming back in the game. And I guess DiVincenzo, though, like End of the first quarter, there was a bit of a flow. Second quarter, you get Gobert and Conley and McDaniels come back in, and all of a sudden, things really kind of slow down for Minnesota. Ant comes back in the game midway through the quarter, and it doesn't help anything. From the midway point on in the second quarter, the Wolves scored just 7 points, and they finished with, well, I say that. The first half of the quarter was even better because they finished scoring just, or even worse, I should say. Oh, no. Sorry, I flipped that. They did, yeah, they scored 7 points in the last half of the first quarter. They scored 16 last half of the second quarter. They finished the second quarter with just 16 points. They were outscored 30-16. The defense wasn't great. The offense was even worse. Giving up 60 points and a half is not a good thing, but at least the Pacers are a good offensive team. They're not a great defensive team, and they didn't even have Miles Turner. Like, there was no reason for Minnesota's offense to struggle the way it did, and the Wolves were down 14 points at halftime, 60-46. The third quarter kind of started the same way. In fact, the Pacers kind of maintained this lead, and then at just under 8 minutes left, right after DiVincenzo hits a three, Andrew Nembhard drives to his right, puts his arm up, and kind of like, I think it was like his forearm hits Mike Conley in the throat. Conley reacts. Of course, Mike Conley's not a flopper of any kind. No call is made. John Goble, the official, is standing right there, but doesn't call anything. And then Gobert, of course, saw it, and so he gave. It was more of a shoulder shiver or an elbow bicep shiver than a forearm shiver to Nembhard. Just completely knocked him off balance by throwing his shoulder into him. I think on the broadcast, they thought there was an elbow to the jaw. I don't think that ever happened, but it was not a play in the ball. It was not a basketball play. It was an enforcer play, right? It was, I'm going to throw my shoulder into you. And then Nembhard threw the ball at Gobert, which Nembhard had already gotten a technical earlier in the game. So that meant he was ejected. Gobert was assessed a flagrant 2 and ejected. There was no call made on the, going back further to the contact to Conley's throat. So I didn't really have a problem with how that was handled. I guess I don't know how far back they could go to assess on that type of review. I don't think you can go back and assess a common foul prior to the illegal contact that necessitates a flagrant 2 and an ejection. But other than that, like, it's what I thought would happen based on how the play played out. But it really kind of got the Wolves going. Like, DiVincenzo immediately made a 3 to force the Pacers out. The Wolves were down 9 when this all took place. And they took a lead like 5 minutes later. Ant hits that tough 2 in the paint. Actually, Ant scored and hits a tough 2 in the paint. There's a couple of blocks from the Wolves. And then you get Jalen Clark steals the inbound pass. He literally it was like an actual lane in the weed situation. It was like he was standing still in the corner. I know that Alvarado at the Pelicans does this all the time. And we saw Jordan McLaughlin do it occasionally in the past with the Wolves. But Jalen Clark, in this case, was standing like barely on the court in the corner, almost like he was part of the bench that was standing and celebrating the Ant bucket that he made after the spin move that he put on. And then he shot in, stole the pass, missed a shot, got his own rebound, and scored. The Wolves took a 1-point lead just like 5 minutes after the Gobert ejection. They make up that 9-point deficit, go up by 1. And then the rest of the game was just a hard-fought, entertaining game. And this is where, like, the first 2 and really 2.5 quarters, the Wolves were very flat. And we'll talk about the close. We'll talk about what happened at the end. And I think a lot of credit, the Pacers deserve a lot of credit. But early in the game, Minnesota just was not ready to go. And we haven't seen a whole lot of that. Obviously, the Wolves have won 8 in a row against mostly inferior competition. And this was a game they should have won. They just seemed really out of it the first couple of quarters. And to credit the Pacers for something they did all night long is they were pushing the pace all the time. They're not playing it quite as fast of a pace as they have the last couple of years, but they're still like borderline top 10 in terms of overall pace. Well, actually, on cleaning the glass, they're higher than that. They're they're 6th in points plus per 100 possessions. So that's how many points per 100 possessions the team add in transition play, which isn't exactly the same as pace. I think they're like 11th on Basketball Reference in pace. But they're 9th in terms of, 8th in frequency of running in transition on cleaning the glass, 2nd in running off of steals. The Pacers are straight running off of makes in this game. So we'll talk a little bit about how that impacted the Wolves defensively, and then some of the Wolves counters that worked well early in the game, but then why it didn't work later in the game. And we'll talk about the actual close, how the Timberwolves performed in clutch situations, and how that just has been awful for Minnesota really all season long. But what went wrong exactly in this one? And we'll do individual studs and duds here at the end. So we'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Hungry Root. When it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, I've had an ongoing problem. I just don't have the time, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. Between work, life, trying to eat healthier, the podcast, I feel stressed out sometimes. You go to the grocery store, you buy things you don't need, and then you don't actually have time to cook, and so you don't eat the things you buy, and then it makes it even harder to stick to health goals. But everything changed when I discovered Hungry Root. Honestly, it's been a game changer. It's the easiest way to eat healthy without all the stress. With Hungry Root, it's like having a personal shopper and a nutritionist all in one. They take care of your grocery shopping, recommending meals and groceries based on your taste and health goals, from anti-inflammatory to high protein and gluten-free options. And the best part is that every meal is ready in 15 minutes or less. I'm talking quick, healthy meals that actually taste great, all delivered straight to your door. It's a huge time saver, and it can make healthy eating so much simpler. You're going to love Hungry Root as much as I do. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box and a free item in every box for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA, to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA. Don't miss out. Today's episode is also brought to us by our friends at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, and more, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on, well, actually, food delivery is a pretty good example. I don't know, maybe there's just like random things you buy when you stop at the gas station or you have to go to Target or whatever. Those things can add up. With Monarch Money, you could budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to do everything. You can check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Maybe you have a partner that you're managing money with. You either share accounts or you have personal accounts that you track together. You can set goals and stay on the same page without all the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. All right. So talked a little bit about what the Pacers did really well in this one. I might as well, I guess, finish that thought. So the Pacers are pushing the pace, especially after makes. They were really pushing so fast that they were getting down the floor before the Wolves could even match up how they wanted to and set their defense. The Wolves tried to set up a zone, and it actually worked really well early in the game when the Pacers, both teams were struggling to score. But Indiana wasn't shooting the ball well early. The Wolves weren't either. But the zone was pretty effective. And Gobert in the middle of the zone is always effective, and he's still mobile enough and certainly long enough and has good enough instincts to make that really effective. And I thought Finch did a really good job at mixing in when they were playing zone. Over the course of the game, though, that doesn't work as well, especially once you tire out a little bit. It can be a little bit more challenging. And also down the stretch when the pace is picked up, it's hard to set up a zone when the other team's running in transition because you got to match up, right? You can't. It's hard to get into a zone after misses or after turnovers. It pretty much has to be after makes, and the Pacers are pushing after makes, keeping the Wolves from really setting their defense up. So that kept Minnesota on their heels, and the Pacers just played at a breakneck speed. They were trying to get down the floor before everybody on the Wolves even got down the floor, much less the defense was set up, and that led to a ton of fast break points for Indiana. Overall for the night, the Wolves actually beat the Pacers in actual fast break points, according to the box score, by a bucket, 20-18. But there's more to it than that, right? It's the secondary break, the semi-transition opportunities. That's certainly part of it. And it's also the timeliness of some of those, right? Some of those fast break points for Minnesota, like the Pacers were doing this stuff toward the end of the game when they were coming back from multiple possessions down in the fourth quarter. And that was a problem. I mean, you have to credit Indiana for doing that. I also talked about how Indiana's second in the NBA in running off of steals. Well, they did that in this game too. I mean, Minnesota, they actually ended up only turning it over 15 times. The Pacers had 7 steals. That contributed to Indiana being able to score off of those extra opportunities that the Wolves did give them. Even if it wasn't a major issue for Minnesota, it played into what the hands of what the Pacers want to do. Down the stretch in this game, it was actually like the fourth quarter, really from the ejections in the third quarter on. This game was a ton of fun. Just a really, really fun watch all the way around. Like, there's just way too much, especially in the third and fourth quarters, to like really get into detail on. I'm not going to go blow by blow here, but there was a lot of like back and forth. Wolves would hit a three, Pacers would hit a three. Wolves would get a dunk or a layup, and then the Pacers would hit a three or get fouled. A lot of scoring in the first and fourth quarters, and really the third quarter too. It was like the first really 6-7 minutes of this game, nobody could score, and then all of a sudden the floodgates were open, and it was just clearly two top 10 offensive teams outplaying the defense. End of regulation, the Timberwolves are down 3 with 57 seconds left. Jaden McDaniels hits a three in the right corner, was left open. A good swing pass from Mike Conley to McDaniels. And DiVincenzo just missed a couple of threes before that, which is uncharacteristic of Dante here of late. And McDaniels knocks down the massive corner three to tie the game. And then the Pacers turn it over on the other end. The Timberwolves get it coming back the other way. Edwards gets fouled, makes both free throws. So now the Wolves are up by a bucket with 30 seconds left. And the Pacers miss a three-pointer, go for the rebound. And I believe this is the one where Toppin misses the three-pointer, which is one of like only a couple he missed all night. We'll talk more about that. And DiVincenzo tries to get the rebound and save it, throws it out of bounds. Initially, the call is Wolves ball. They overturn it, call it Pacers ball. And so now the Pacers inbound, and Jay McDaniels is guarding TJ McConnell. And because of the left to right motion, McDaniels gets a little knocked off his line by DiVincenzo, who's crossing paths with, I forget the Pacers player he was guarding, probably Mathurin. And so McDaniels just gets slightly knocked off his line and is just on the back hip of TJ McConnell, who still kind of semi-slams on the brakes, not a full like Luka Garza, Anthony Edwards deceleration, but McDaniels tries to block the shot, and McConnell has enough body control to just kind of slow himself down and loft it like after Jaden's hand swipes by. McConnell's able to just loft it high up off the glass to tie the game. With 4.1 left, the Wolves call timeout. They call a play for Anthony Edwards to go to his left, to his favorite spot on the floor, just above the break on the left side, but he loses his dribble, doesn't notice that the Pacers sent two at the ball like they've been doing all game, which is the other thing, in addition to running after makes and trying to push the Wolves in transition, which we knew they would do. They also sent two at Ant all night long. And Ant's decision-making was a little iffy. We'll talk about that too. If he had seen right away that the dude that was down low on, I think it was Nas or Randle, came up to double Ant, and then McDaniels' guy sank back into the paint. Jaden McDaniels was wide open, and then right as that happened, Ant lost his dribble, so he was going to his left and ended up shooting a really tough shot, kind of fading, floating to his left at the buzzer, which missed just short, and the game went to overtime. And then overtime started weirdly enough. The Wolves turned it over. The Pacers immediately turned it over on a weird backcourt violation, and then the Wolves go up four consecutive free throws. Ant, Julius Randle, and then Obi Toppin continues his career night. He hits a three, Ant hits a two on the other end. Obi Toppin makes another three. Conley banks in a three, which was all fun and games until Obi Toppin banked in a three a little bit later. And then the Wolves still go up 5 with 1:06 left. So they were up by 5 points. So the two things that kill me about this game were the first 2.5 quarters of just lackadaisical play. Yes, they were still in it. Yes, they were hanging around, kind of shades of the Magic game on Friday. But then you had this ejection moment where, okay, we're in this now. We're actually going to play hard. And then the second thing that kills me is that they're up 5 with 1:06 left in overtime, and you get a Thomas Bryant three-pointer, which was just a little bit of a miscommunication for the Wolves, and a good shot by Bryant. Ant misses a shot, which was poor shot selection on the other end. They come down. Obi Toppin banks in a three from the top of the key to make it a 1-point Pacers lead. The Wolves come down after a timeout, call a play where Anthony Edwards comes around, a little bit of a faux kind of pin down from Julius Randle, but just a curl from Ant where he gets the ball pretty much at the left elbow a little bit lower than the elbow, like 10, 12 feet from the rim, and immediately goes up into a shot, which was actually really smart, like a really good play call. And I'm sure the option was for Ant to do one of a couple of things, but that was a very intelligent, like everyone's expecting Ant to come out to pop all the way out to the perimeter. So for him to cut that short and curl into the paint and get the pass from, I think DiVincenzo or Conley. And then he immediately tries to go up. So his arm gets grabbed and he gets free throws, knocks down the clutch free throws. Let's not lose that here. Ant knocks down the clutch free throws to put the Wolves up 1 with 18 seconds. The Pacers have 2 timeouts. They don't call one, which I think, that can throw teams off. And they don't call the timeout. So the Wolves don't get to make any defensive subs, although they already had put Nickeil Alexander-Walker in for Conley, so they made that sub. The Pacers come down and are a little bit discombobulated. It really ends up being a desperation kind of quarter three-point attempt, fading out of bounds. His heel was almost on the sideline there. Toppin's was fading out of bounds with Alexander-Walker all over his shooting hand. Obi Toppin somehow makes the three-pointer for his career high 7 3-pointer on the night. He had 35 or something crazy in this game, 34 points, 7 of 10 on threes, 12 of 19 was Obi Toppin, puts them up by 2. The Wolves call a timeout, 3.1 left. And instead of calling a play for Anthony Edwards, they instead call it for Julius Randle, knowing, especially if he's on the same side of the floor as Ant, all the attention is going to be for Anthony Edwards. You're not going to get a double on Randle. And they're able to get him where he's comfortable, around 12 or so feet from the basket, back to the basket, kind of spins in a little bit closer, just leaves the shot short. Could have been a foul for the hand on the back, but they typically don't call that in a post-up situation when the guy spins to shoot a turnaround. And Randle just misses and the Wolves lose. I liked the play call for Ant where he got the free throws. I liked what they were trying to do with Ant at the end of regulation when he lost his dribble and then forced a tough shot. And I liked the final play call too. Like I like that they tried something different every time. And here's the thing. You watch the NBA, like watch a game every night, and if you watch close games, so many teams are calling nothing except ISOs. Just flat, one guy up top who does whatever with the ball in his hands. And you could do that with Ant, but they're trying to do something a little bit more creative. It's not working. And I didn't mind the call for Julius Randle to get involved there either. I just didn't think that was bad. I've got a crazy stat that Alan Horton, the voice of the Timberwolves on the radio, posted that I want to talk about related to crunch time, clutch performances. And then we'll hit a couple more things, studs and duds here. That's how we'll close the show today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at Prize Picks. Basketball season, the regular season is 3/4 of the way over. Of course, we got college basketball all week this week. There's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you just pick more or less on at least two player projections for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's easy to use, available in over 30 states, and lets you mix and match projections across different sports. For instance, you could pick Luka Doncic to score 25 or more in the next Lakers game. Maybe you're picking Jason Tatum for more than 8 rebounds in a given night, or Anthony Edwards for more than 30 points, which seems like not a bad move more often than not. You can do everything quickly and easily at Prize Picks. They make it super simple. You can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds and stay engaged all game long. And they also have fast payouts. When you win, your money hits your account in as little as 15 minutes with no waiting around. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right. Let's talk, I guess, before we get to studs and duds. Oh, I got to give the Alan Horton stats. Alan Horton posted this following the game. The Timberwolves have now missed their last 11 game tying or go ahead shots in the final 10 seconds of fourth quarter or overtime. I don't know how far back that goes. It's probably just this year. They missed their last 11 game tying or go ahead shots in the final 10 seconds of fourth quarter or overtime, which is nuts. There's also somebody who the Twitter account is Pitless Ball. I don't know anything about this account other than they say they're a Tiago Splitter fan account. But they have a post of every Anthony Edwards game-winning or game-tying shot attempt ever, which is not super pretty. He also says shot tracking began in 1997. Since then, 246 players have taken at least 20 shots that are those last 24-second game tying or go-ahead shot. Ant is 243rd of those 246 players in field goal percentage. This is more about the quality of shot than anything else, right? This isn't because Anthony Edwards is not clutch or Anthony Edwards is, whatever. It's the quality of shots or the lack of quality of shots that Anthony Edwards is getting in these situations. He hit one of the shots in this montage. He hits a game tying 3 in the playoffs against Memphis a couple years ago, right? Like Anthony Edwards isn't. It's not that he's missing these shots because they're clutch shots. It's because he too often bails on whatever it is he's supposed to be doing, most likely, and just ends up taking a really difficult shot because that's what he wants to do. And he is good at making tough shots. It's just the combination of all of these factors. It has not gone in his favor to date. There is a coaching element to this, obviously. Again, I liked the play calls in these situations. The one where Ant shot that crazy shot after he lost his dribble at the end of regulation, that's a tough one. I would imagine he would have done the same thing had he not lost his dribble. But because he did, it's easy to blame that on why he didn't look for Jaden McDaniels. Now, that goes back to remember the LeBron finals from 15 years ago where he passed it to whoever it was at the time. This is pre-Kevin Love Cavs even, I think, who was open instead of taking a tough shot. Do you want Jaden McDaniels shooting an open shot in that situation, or do you want Ant shooting over a triple team? Now the answer is a McDaniels open shot, maybe not 3 months ago, right? So there's a push and a pull there. There's some stuff that needs to get straightened out for sure. But for me, as bad as the late game I don't want to say bad. This was more about Pacers execution because we could complain about that, but guess who made those clutch free throws? It was Anthony Edwards. The Wolves were up 2 with 18 seconds left, and it took an Obi Toppin ridiculous fadeaway in the corner. And it's also true the Wolves should have never been in that situation against a shorthanded Pacers team that had 5 of their top, 6 or 7 guys either hurt or ejected in this game, right? The Wolves, I'll go back to what I said last segment. The things that kill me about this game are the fact the Wolves, it took until the ejection in the third quarter for them to wake up because they should have been playing much better before then. And then the fact they were up 5 with 1:06 left in overtime and still found a way to lose. And then up again 2 points with, like I just said, 2 points with 18 seconds left. But it's more to me about the lackadaisical start for Minnesota and a really good game plan for the Pacers. And these dudes that don't get to play a lot, playing their faces off. Obi Toppin played 45 minutes. I know he does start for them, but or plays a lot for them as a rotation guy anyway. But for him to have 34 and 10 and knock down 7 threes, and then look no further than some of these other dudes Quentin Jackson was great for them off the bench. 13 points, 4 of 6 shooting, was really, really good. I thought Ben Shepherd was pretty good defensively. TJ McConnell had 11 and 13. Tony Bradley, 12 and 9 off the bench. These guys outplayed some of Minnesota's rotation guys and were just really good. And you have to credit the coaching, the game plan for the Pacers, and the execution of some of these unsung type players that are what served up this loss to Minnesota. It was a combination of all those factors. And I'm not going to sit here and blame strictly late game execution or whatever. This is one of those where you did enough that you should have won. Could you have done more? Absolutely. You shake the opponent's hand and you say, that's why it's hard to win 9 games in a row is games like this. And I said all along, they'd probably win 4 out of 5 on this homestand. Well, hopefully this is their only loss, right? Now you get a couple against the Pelicans. You gotta win those. You got to win those games. 2 consecutive against the Pelicans, thankfully not on consecutive nights. It's Wednesday and Friday of this week, and then back out on the road to take on the Pacers on Monday night after 2 days off on Saturday and Sunday. So if they do win both games against the Pels, that's winning 4 to 5 on the homestand, which it stinks that this was an overtime loss, but 4 to 5 on the homestand is not bad. And then at Indiana, Phoenix, and Detroit, you got to win 2 out of those 3. Ideally, you sweep them, and you're still talking a shot at the 4 or 5 seed in the West. I really still believe it's on the table for the Wolves. I do quickly want to do studs and duds. I typically would leave more time for this. Studs, obviously, Ant, he got 20 free throws attempts in this game. He shot 1 of 11 outside the arc. He hit the clutch free throws late. It wasn't his best game, but they're not in this game without him. He was playing hard the whole game. We have to, even though it was a high volume type, not do much else type game and a terrible 3-point shooting night. The shot selection, I didn't really get into this, but it was really bad early for Ant. A lot of settling. It was part of that lackadaisical play. He still was the best player on the floor for Minnesota, and they would have been as close as they were without him. I think I'd go Reid for another stud. He had 21 points, 4 rebounds in this game, especially coming off a poor game the other night, or literally the night before. So I'd give him a stud, and I'd probably go Julius Randle for the third one. I know he missed that shot late, missed some free throws early, but 17, 6, and 4, and I thought his activity was good. No real duds in this one, just a couple weird observations. Dante DiVincenzo was a minus 20 in 32 minutes, despite scoring 19 points and making 5 threes. Mike Conley only scored 9 points in 32 minutes, was a plus 24 in this game, and he played a lot down the stretch. Rudy Gobert played 22 minutes before he was ejected, and it was an even 0 plus minus. Fun with plus minus, right? Anyway, weird game, disappointing loss. I don't know. There's so much to talk about in this game, but there's no real conclusions to draw other than they've got to keep cleaning up that late game execution, and they can't show up to games against shorthanded teams or inferior teams, and the Pacers are more shorthanded than inferior, but they can't show up and just go through the motions for 2.5 quarters, and that's what they did, unfortunately, in this game. All right. That's all I got for you today on the show. Of course, I'll be back tomorrow. We'll set up the rest of the week. We'll look at the Pels matchups, among other things. We'll talk about the Western Conference playoff race as well. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder, you can also subscribe to the daily Locked On Wolves newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Again, sign up right now at LockedOnDaily.com. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.